Hey, what's going on, everyone? We're going to continue on with chapter 15 here. We're going to get into section 3. All right, this shouldn't be a really long section. It's kind of self explanatory, so my video clip here won't be that long. All right, we already got into the Civil War, strengths, advantages, disadvantages, um, the philosophies of both, who was victorious in the beginning, who wasn't, general versus general comparison. We did all that. What I want to focus on today is the Emancipation Proclamation, and this is section 3. A lot of people know it, but a lot of people don't really know what it is. All right, so we're really just going to kind of dive into this. You'll have a homework assignment. You can submit it on the Google Doc, and that's really it. I believe tomorrow you'll have a vocab quiz. We'll do sections 4 and 5. I'll give you a chance to make stuff up, and then get into next week of you pretty much your last chapter test before we start talking about your final. All right. The first line here is really important. It's going to be on your test. All right. In the beginning of the Civil War, President Lincoln's goal was to preserve the United States, not to end slavery. The Civil War in the beginning was about preserving the United States. We'll get to the concept of ending slavery shortly. All right. Freeing all the slaves in the U.S. would leave the border states. Remember, we talked about those border states. All right, Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware. West Virginia had left Virginia and joined the United States. All right, but those 4 border states really were important to Lincoln. So Lincoln knew he just couldn't free everybody right away in the beginning. All right, he wanted to figure out a way to turn the Civil War to be about slavery rather be about preserving was his number one priority. All right, by 1862, Lincoln realizes that pretty much the only thing keeping the South going as far as economic things was slavery. All right, slaves were working in factories, they were working the farms. All right, so if we could make the war about slavery and end slavery altogether, it ultimately would crush the South. In order to do this, though, Lincoln needs a couple of Northern victories here to really put out his Emancipation Proclamation. You can't lose battle after battle after battle to the South and then drop something like this. So with Grant's victories in the West at Chattanooga, Fort Donelson, down in soon to be Vicksburg, and in Tennessee, Lincoln will ultimately, actually after the Battle of Antietam, will issue the Emancipation Proclamation. And on January 1st, it becomes legal. So let's talk about it. Here's Lincoln. Here's the proclamation. Yeah, I know it's a little blurry, but that's the basic concept. There's his famous signature right there. Okay? So, here's what it does. Well, I think that's the next slide. All right, what did it do? It freed slaves areas that were fighting for the Union. All right, let's talk about that. All right, let's go back. It frees slaves in the area in the blue fighting for the Union. And you're saying, well, there's no slavery in the Union. Right. Okay, so does it really free slaves here? No. Does it really free slaves here? No, because in the South they had their own government and they weren't going to listen to President Lincoln. Okay, slaves in the border states were not affected. Really had no impact on slaves in the South. All right, Southern states actually didn't even have to follow it since they're not part of the U.S. And in 1863, it really doesn't do much in terms of slavery. Here's what it does do, and this is so important: changes the Civil War to be about slavery. It makes it a moral issue. It's not just protecting the United States and preserving the United States and fighting to keep the country together and putting down the rebellion. Now it's about freeing people. And England will officially stay out of the war. All right, they're not going to join the South. They really can't side with a nation that really will continue to allow slavery. It really blocks England. It is a political and wartime masterpiece put together by Lincoln by now changing the dynamic. Again, in the beginning of the Civil War, it was about preserving the Union. I think I actually asked that question a couple times on your test. All right. After the emancipation, it becomes about freeing people. All right, and that changes the dynamics of it. It's one of the first documents that talks about slavery, and it's going to actually help write in what becomes the 13th Amendment, which we'll get to later. All right. Over 189. Oh, the other thing it does do is it allow African Americans to fight in the North. Okay, it allows them to join the Northern Army. Over 189,000 African Americans will serve in the North. Now, they ran a big risk. If they were captured, all right, they would immediately be returned to slavery or even just killed. And there are many stories. of African American soldiers who were captured in a military uniform who were just executed on the spot. All right, they were paid less than white soldiers. They took a lot of risks. Even the commanding officers of the groups, if you were a commanding officer of an African American regiment, you were captured by the South, you could be executed also. They served as cooks, wagon drivers, hospital aides. They are a major part of the United States winning the Civil War. I mean, again, we had, and I say we, the North, had more soldiers than the South. We had more of a population. And now, because of the Emancipation Proclamation, it frees up 189 more thousand more troops to fight for the North. And here's the picture. Okay. This is one of the most famous, and if we were in school, I would show you the movie Glory. It's based on the 54th Massachusetts. All right, this was the commanding general, the commanding major in charge of it, and they are going to be one of the most decorated African American regiments in the Civil War out of Boston. And if you actually go to Boston, there's a memorial for them of the 54th Massachusetts. And again, if we were watching the movie Glory, I would obviously be showing you this, but unfortunately, we're not together, so you just have to listen to my awesome voice. All right? So, again, Emancipation Proclamation, what did it do? It allowed African Americans to fight for the North. Okay? It made the Civil War down here. It changed the Civil War to be about freedom. It blocks England. Does it really have an impact on slavery? Not really. Okay? It will technically free all the slaves, but there's a lot of questions there. The 13th Amendment will be the document that ultimately frees all the slaves. We'll get into that more when we do chapter 16. Okay? And why President Lincoln wrote it. So, again, Section 3 is really about the Emancipation Proclamation. What did it do? What didn't it do? Why is it so important? And the homework will be posted. It's going to be worksheet checkpoints 1 and 2. Complete it. Submit the Google Doc when you're done. And we will do probably a vocabulary quiz tomorrow. And then we'll get into 4 and 5 later on. All right, guys, take care.